You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may just be punters, but we love to talk. A welcome return to Argentina resulted in a return of brotherly domination as the Marquezes continued their clean sweep, albeit a little bit closer this time. As ever, I am your host Kyle Power, and today I am joined in the virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. In the co-host seats, it's Dutch Journo Supremo, Jules Seegers. How's it going, Jules?
Hey, Kyle. I'm hoping to be cheered up a bit by you guys because I'm slightly disappointed in the start of the season.
Oh, I don't think you're the only one. There's been a few grumblings, but we can tell you why that's not to be the case. Someone else has joined us at the last minute before he travels off around the world on a fan epic. It's smooth talking Texan Adam Rosales. How's it going, Adam?
Hey, glad to make it. It was pretty last minute, but I'm luckily able to swing by for an hour before making my journey across the other side of the world. But I'm in the same line of thinking as Jules, where I'm a bit disappointed with the race. It's hoping for a little bit more of an exciting season, but it looks like we got an alien back in the group.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also joined by tire-obsessed trumpeter Matt Trumpets, who's also going to tell us why these two are wrong.
Completely and 100%. I always love a good argument, and I've been following the vibes online, and I can tell you right now, it's better than you think it's going to be.
Excellent fighty talk. We like to hear that. So straight on with the weekend overview, and there's not much to overview apart from we don't have Jorge Martin again. It was really nice to see him video into the press conference, but he's not going to be in Austin either. Probably not Qatar. We're probably not going to see him until the European leg. So get well soon, Jorge. And I'm actually glad he's sitting out and not rushing back. But Variety of Marquez has a championship lead of 8 points over his brother, and Bagnaia another 14 back. So going into practice here, and a very welcome return to Argentina. What a great track. And Jules, it looked like almost straight away Bagnaia was kind of on the back foot in practice and wanting to mess around with his bike quite a bit.
Definitely. I remember I tuned in and I was looking for okay, is he any closer to Marc Marquez? And then I think every listener recognizes this. You scroll your eyes down the order in the television graphic, and there he was somewhere around P13 or so in FP1, and I was like, darn. I mean, we hope for some competition, and because don't really believe in the competition between the brothers, but he just started where he left off in Thailand, it seems, and it was just hardly making it into Q2 this time again. This time he did make it, and I believe he also went down. I don't have a visual recognition, but.
Yeah, it was the end of practice. So the end of not free practice, the end of their practice. That's why he just scraped into Q2. He went down right at the end of the practice, and his time was just good enough. He was 10th in the end. He didn't. He almost got unseated by Morbidelli, but he only just scraped through. So yeah, real struggle with him. And he looked like David Todozzi was getting a bit almost annoyed. I saw him in the pit box, like getting quite animated, sort of explaining to mechanics how it looked like Pecco was overriding. But as ever, it was looking bleak from the first practice, and we've seen Pecco do this loads and look a bit out of shape, out of sorts, but he did build throughout the weekend. But what was also looking quite a big build through the weekend was the Honda resurgence, and Zarco looking on it all weekend, which is great. He's been fastest in a load of the practice sessions, like right up there. Really nice to see. But no one was going to topple Marc. So 36 seconds, 1 minute 36 into a new lap record, which I think was one of the older lap records back from, I think all the way back in like 2019 or 2020. It was absolutely crazy lap. So Marc Marquez gets pole, Alex Marquez in second, Zarco backs up that genuine pace with third, which is actually great to see. Bagnaia, we made it through to Q2, and he managed to put it fourth on the grid, so fair play that he builds, and he always seems to save some sort of result. We've got Pedro Acosta in fifth. in fifth. So quite a good front row, all lined up, ready for an intriguing sprint race. So onto the sprint then, and well, they've started exactly how they started last round. Crazy, the Marquez Bro domination at the front, and what you have to say, a great save from Bagnaia Trumpets to get third.
Yeah, but I know I'm really curious because Jules has been talking about this, but am I the only one who thinks it's really interesting that the Marquez brothers on Ducatis are ahead of Bagnaia also on a Ducati? Is it just something in the water where they grew up that they happen to ride the bike the same way? Or is Mark maybe playing some tricks with his data? Because we know, for example, Bagnaia really depended on Martin's data to help his setup over the weekend.
It's kind of weird to tell, or hard to find a path on this, but I don't think it's the water. I think Mark just really put a lot of effort into what's going on right now. Pecco is kind of not the old guy, but I feel like he got too comfortable at Ducati. And I think that he was used to riding in quote unquote easy bike. And I think now that Mark is on the easy bike, it's kind of showing him a little bit of, the hard elbow into the ribs that he's getting this season. And I think that Mark really just wants to be back on top. And you can tell I think there was a photo from the first race in Thailand where you could just see how he lost some weight. His face looks skinnier. It's like dude was already tiny. He's already skinny. And yet he's still putting in a lot of effort, maybe because he's getting older. It seems like he really wants this comeback story to happen.
Well, he's hungry, and he's hungrier than ever, and you can see it. Like, yeah, this is a tough gig for Pecco, as we've seen a lot. But yeah, like this was kind of predicted. Like everyone thought, like sort of Pecco was really good, but he's never been properly challenged against an absolutely great. And Danny Henny couldn't be here tonight. Has said many times that like he thinks Jorge Martin this is the difference between seeing Pecco going up against really good riders rather than going up against a great rider, which I just think Pecco's a little bit on the back foot. But somebody who started on the back foot in the sprint was Zarco. Amazing from P3 on the grid, made an awful start, plummeted down, got clagged up in the midfield, but had mega pace and a comeback for fourth, just really cementing Honda like having a massive resurgence, Jules.
Yeah, and we already saw Honda coming out of the winter tests, or actually starting in Thailand, way differently than they seemed in the winter tests. And we were a bit like, okay, is this real? Is this the Thailand track, the heat, whatever? Let's see. But then Zarco was on it from Friday on, and it was such a shame to see him drop back. But great recovery race. And some say like, yeah, but this track in Argentina really suits him, and possibly, sure, I bet it suits him. But we'll talk about this later, surely. But it was a real sign, I thought, of what Honda is capable of right now, and that they aren't as hopeless as they seemed the last couple of years, and even in winter testing. So, and I think that is a real positive for the whole sport.
I mean, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence. Maybe it's a good track for Zarco, but maybe it's also a good track for Honda. And just my personal observation is I really thought the first race was just sort of a one-off because they did well there. Like I was surprised at Honda because I expected Honda to just be nowhere. They seemed to be really far off, whereas Yamaha was making strides. And then race one, race two, here we are, second race weekend, and they're up there looking like they might be able to snatch almost a podium position. And yeah, the starts weren't particularly great, but that's something that I think is easily gotten on top of by the engineers as they go on. What I will say is I think it's a real shame that instead of an actual engine, they've just got like two gerbils and a wheel in that bike, because oh my, the straight line speed deficit was hard. He was was horrible. If they get a better engine in that bike, I genuinely see them like giving Ducati and Aprilia a very, very hard time.
Do we know if Zarco's on a factory bike or is he on last year's Honda?
It's
Do you guys know?
factory. I think. Yeah, I think they're all factories because they're just throwing everything at it.
Yeah, it seems like it. I was just curious because I was also just blown away by the pace, and it seemed like is Zarco in a Pramac, or like what's going on here? Because it just completely caught me off guard.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I think the livery's worth several tenths of a second a lap because that's actually better than the main factory bikes. But yeah, I believe they're all factories and they have the concessions. So they've been testing loads and throwing everything at it. Jules,
Colin Edwards.
Yeah. Yes, it's pretty. Yeah, so what it harks back to the older, World Superbikes, the HRCs and the World Superbikes. Lovely, Jules.
Yeah, and we're still in the sprint, but just to go on a little bit, springs to my mind actually that at the end of last season, when they had their concession tests and post-season tests, the tendency within Honda was like, okay, we're not gonna listen to Joan Mir, who is actually the leader of our factory team, because he just moans and he crashes. And it was like, Zarco is our go-to guy now for feedback. And Zarco was already in the latter stages of last season their quickest driver. And he was actually getting showing some promising results. I remember getting them out of those last positions and towards the top 10. So I can imagine that during winter they have gone from his feedback a lot, and maybe that's what's giving him a bit of success right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because you're right. Johan Mir is always very moody and quite publicly critical of Honda, so they will naturally sort of listen to the person who's saying nicer things about them, more constructive. Not saying that Johan Mir's not constructive behind the scenes, but he was looking pretty good as well over the weekend. But somebody who would quite the reason to be moody and a bit angry is poor Miguel Oliveira, who got absolutely harpooned by Fermin Aldeguer, and he seems to be the unluckiest rider ever. I remember Oliveira getting harpooned by Marquez, I think by Morbidelli, did he last year? I just remember him being harpooned by a lot of riders, having been involved in crashes which are not his fault and getting quite injured. So he's had to fly home. Looks like he might have damaged the tendons in the shoulders, so get well soon. Another crash was Binder being knocked off by Morbidelli again. Morbidelli seemed to sort of getting Bagnaia's way a bit at the beginning of the last round, and caused Bagnaia's qualifying kerfuffle. I remember last year, I think he punted Quartararo out as well, so he was getting a bit rough and ready, and he was putting some hard moves on people, Adam. Morbidelli gets his elbows out, doesn't he?
He did, but I think that was just a motorcycle racing incident. I didn't think it was that bad. I know we kind of want to slap Morbidelli on the wrist a bit, but I felt like that was just... I mean, if you look at the onboards from behind him, Morbidelli never really left the racing line. It was... I felt like he held his line and it just kind of veered into each other, while Morbidelli didn't really do anything different what anybody else would have done. I don't think it was the aggressive nature that he tends to be like lately. And I don't know, I just feel like it's worth defending him a bit in that scenario.
That's a good point, because the stewards did as well, so he didn't get any penalty for it. But Aldeguer gets a long lap penalty, which is quite a soft penalty, really, considering you've just sent one of your rivals home in an ambulance. So Oliveira's out, but at the front, it was Marc Marquez pulling away, holding station with his brother in second as well to make that a Marc Marquez triple sort of clean sweep so far. Bagnaia getting third, Zarco, as we mentioned, in fourth, and Digi coming to get fifth, Fabio Di Giannantonio, so he's still recovering from his collarbone, and it's a very frustrating pre-season incident, gets fifth. So that was that for the sprint. Okay, on to the Grand Prix review then, and there's a few major topics we'll talk about. We'll talk first a bit about Marx versus Alex. We'll talk about, is it panic stations for Bagnaia? Then we'll talk a bit about Morbidelli. We've just mentioned him as well, and is he being a bit too aggressive? And we've got lots of honourable mentions. So we'll get straight into it. And the battle at the front in the main race, we actually had an exciting race. I thought it was going to be a bit of a boring race and it was going to be Mark disappearing at the front again. But straight from the off, we could see Alex going with him, and Mark wasn't sprinting away too much. He got about a second and wasn't actually sprinting away from it, and then all of a sudden, like, we missed it. Yeah, the cameras cut back to him, and it looked like we're having a replay of Thailand again. So it's on lap 4. Looked like Mark just pushed the front a little bit too hard into turn 1 and let Alex by, and then didn't exactly look like he was punting him round again. So did anyone here genuinely sort of think that he was doing this on purpose? Because I initially thought, I was like, oh, surely again, like Adam, like surely again he's just playing around with the tyre pressures. But once he saw the mistake, I was like, oof, he's actually looking like he's struggling.
Yeah, I totally thought that he was just because they didn't show the incident on camera right away, and I thought that he just slowed down, let him by. I was like, oh, it's just tire pressure again. How boring. But then it turned out to be an actual little moment. I was like, oh, okay, I guess he's pushing, and then it kind of sparked up the race a little bit, and then seeing Alex be able to kind of hold the zone and be able to not pull a gap, but maintain a gap, and was basically just faultless, metronomic, like just perfect.
One of the things I really like about the way this played out was was watching the fact that even though Marquez might have been marginally faster, like if you put them both on track by themselves, he might have been half a tenth faster a lap, or maybe even 1 or 2 tenths. It wasn't really enough for him to be able to make a clean pass. And really what he had to do was put himself almost on the limit, but just whittled his tires down slightly less till finally his brother ran out of traction. And it was only, I mean, it was well through the race before this happened. So it was a nail biter to watch. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see this dynamic happening, not just with the two of them, but assuming other bikes and riders catch up. It's looking to be like we're going to have some battles like that, at least at tracks that are similar to the one we were racing at this weekend.
Absolutely. It was really, really good to see. And this is the first time we've seen Mark really have to try. It didn't look like he had to try too hard in Thailand and when he dropped the pack so easily. But this time, behind Alex, he was pushing super hard. And you can tell, you can see Adam, he was having to push really hard, amounting to that huge moment he had on lap 15.
Yeah, do you remember the days of Casey Stoner in like 2007-8 when he was on that Ducati? Yeah. It looked like he was riding a Bronco, and it was just all over the place all the time. It wasn't quite that like exciting, but you could see where the front was sliding, the front was locking, the rear was all over the place. It just seemed like he was stretching the bike a little bit more than he did in Thailand, and it just looked like he genuinely was having a push. And normally, I feel like when he's confident and he knows he can overtake, he won't do it until the penultimate lap. This time he started with 8 laps to go or something, because I think that he genuinely didn't think he had the pace there.
Well, and just to speak to that, you say that, but just as to how on the limit he is, he made that one attempt, and then how many laps to get his tires back into the window so he could try again. Like, he knew he was on the limit. He was probably, in terms of the pressures being high, not helping him out, tires being very hot. It seems like a high speed, high energy kind of circuit. So yeah, if the margins are that fine and you take your shot and you miss, you're doomed to several laps of just getting everything back down to give yourself another chance. And I think that might have been why he went so early.
I thought it was a bit two-sided, because at first it looked like a mistake into turn 1 when Alex passed him, and then I started to second guess myself, and I because of what happened in Thailand, I was like, was this just going wide on purpose? Because good riders will know how to run a bit wide in that turn. And is he somehow helping his brother by letting him go in front? But then indeed, you started to notice that he needed to really put an effort to overtake him. And it went wrong the first attempt. And then I was like, what's going on here? But then when he did that, when he made that mistake, and Alex came crossed him underneath again, cut back on him, and he had a bit of distance to Mark, it took like half a lap before Mark was right on his tail again, and it looked like he had a lot of overspeed. So I couldn't like place this in my mind, like what's going on here.
Yeah, we did see a little bit of it. Like when he eventually did pass him again, I think he still has this extra deep place he can go and get this extra little reserve that I think as he pushed, he can sort of draw on it a little bit, which I wasn't sure that he actually had it. But you're right. So I think Adam made a good point of just, he usually waits till the last minute and then left it with quite a few laps to go. He did failed lunge on lap 18 and he left it, for another like sort of 3-4 laps before he could actually have another go. And then, Adam, he looked a little bit, after that, he then looked a little bit desperate and I could see the front squirming, the amount of time on TNT Sports that Neil Hodgson was going, whoa, when Mark was under the braking zones. It was crazy.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that part of it, especially with this current generation of bikes, is the aero is really important. And when you're right behind another rider, you're getting distorted air. And I think that Mark, it's not so much that it messed him up, but it throws off the way that you ride and your positioning on corner entry. And so I could see how he's able to, once he's in the lead in clean air, being able to pull the gap a little bit easier. And it helps with that margin that you need to be able to overtake and then hold on to it. And that's where, over the past few years, Pecco, when he gets overtaken, he has to do it again or fight right back immediately. And if it doesn't, then he tends to kind of hold the position. And I think that clean air is king right now in MotoGP. And I think that that's part of the reason why Mark is able to kind of break a gap right away.
And that's ultimately the interesting question to me, is if you had put him in front of that race, what would that gap have been to his brother, assuming his brother came second to him? Because what we saw was when he stuck behind someone and on merit, he was stuck behind his brother because it was his mistake, fully his. He was in front and he's the one who put himself in second. But as Adam was referencing, that front tire gets hot, the pressures go up, you lose a certain amount of traction, and you very rapidly fall into difficulty. But the difference is, when he finally got by, he had enough tire life left to be able to ride away, in clean air. And his brother absolutely could not keep up with him, probably because he'd just taken that little bit extra out of his tires, trying to stay ahead for the entire race. And this is going to be the thing. The key to beating him is figuring out where your minimum corner entry speed blocks his higher speed that he likes to carry through the turn. We saw this with Acosta in the way he rode the KTM last year. He would get through the turns so early, people would have to brake to not hit him. And he was already accelerating at that point. So you get this really exaggerated concertina. And I did pick up on that, I think, between the two of them throughout the race a bit.
Yeah, it was really interesting, like dynamic and how the brothers were actually engaging in fighting with each other. And Mark said this after the race, and he was like, "Oh, fighting your brother." And when he went wide the first time, he was like, "Oh, I let the brake off because I thought there might have been a chance that he was there, and he didn't want to take them both down." And seeing how hard Mark was pushing on the front, I thought it was a genuine chance he was going to lock the front and take them both out, and that would be a very sort of you wouldn't be surprised if Marc Marquez did something like that at the front of a race against. Yeah, exactly. He would do that. So against his brother, but they obviously get on really, really well. So he was saying it's really interesting. So if this does get late into the season and they are fighting over points, it's going to be fascinating to see if they like massively reduce that risk factor, because at the moment he had like a 30-40% risk margin. It looked like a factor he applied, and he ran wide. But Adam made a great point. He can't have been that comfortable, and when he waited until lap 18 again, lap 17 again, to start attacking. You could see instantly, I think he was comfortable sitting behind Alex, and he goes, right, I need to wait. I need to give myself a fair few laps to make a few attempts at the pass with the safety margin, because he was sat behind Alex, and then all of a sudden, I noted it down, I was like, lap 17, he all of a sudden drove right up to his rear tyre, and you could tell instantly he was going to have a lunge. But when he finally did get away, he only had a few laps to hang on, and he pulled the gap out to about 1.3. So it wasn't as commanding as Thailand, but I don't think anybody's sort of ranting about how good Alex Marquez is. Like, Danny's preseason prediction of Alex Marquez being third doesn't look so wild now. Because his second, and I just can't believe how good he is. Like, I still think he's going to bin it every other corner. I just think, right, surely he's going to throw it down the road. And Adam, like, I always massively pretty much underrate Alex Marquez. I've just never seen that long a consistent run out of him in MotoGP.
Well, it was a few years ago. It was at the Valencia GP. It was what I think it might have been Alex's rookie year when he was on the
Mark
what is
VDS.
it?
Was it?
Yeah,
the
Mark
5-2
VDS.
Honda, yeah.
I remember they were selling his shirts right next to his brother. You know, Mark Marquez shirts. They were like 25 or 30 euro, nothing crazy. But I remember seeing Alex Marquez shirts for 7, and nobody was buying them. Nobody was wearing them. It's like nobody cared. You know, it's like, dude, I feel bad for him. It's like it's his home race, or one of them. But it's this guy. He's been putting in the work, and I feel like having somebody in his life who can help push, train, you know, those kind of things can really help be different. And having Mark as the you know, the goalpost, I mean, there's nobody better than that. Especially if you could ride the same bike. I mean, I don't know how much they talk about the bike itself. I mean, imagine they do, but having that yardstick, the measuring stick, to be able to train together. I mean, that's just monster for him. And he's doing epic. He's doing epic this year. He did good last year. It wasn't until round 3 or 4 where he started kind of falling off, but he started the year really well. I think it was at Coda where he was doing really good, but then he threw open his helmet or something. And then he ended up crashing. And so I feel like he has tended to start the season well and then just kind of divvy off, but hopefully he can hold it this year.
See, for me, this is where it gets really, really interesting and also annoying, because if this keeps up, I'm going to have to learn his proper first name. It's just not fair.
What's he on
I've got
today?
so many things in my head already. One more thing is just going to go pop. But seriously, I made a bit of a joke about it. But I do kind of wonder if, even if it's not something that's obvious in the telemetry, if Mark isn't, or, you know, whether it's intentional or just, as Adam says, because they train together so often, if Mark isn't just sharing a little bit of secret sauce here with his brother that he's not going to ever tell Pecco about, in terms of, well, yeah, you can see when someone brakes, you can see their lean angle, you can see all the telemetry you want. But when the person who is absolutely dead fastest on this bike pulls you aside and says, hey, listen, this is the secret to how I'm getting through this corner. This is how I think about it. This is my mental paradigm. Then, you know, you can't always quite grab that from the telemetry, I think. And I kind of wonder if maybe a little bit of that is creating the situation we see right now.
Yeah, there is a bit of that. Like, of course, they're going to talk. I mean, all the Ducati riders can see each other's data, but if Mark can tell him how to do the thingamajig with the whatchamacallit and is not telling Bagnaia to be doing that, then yeah, that could be a bit of sauce. So I bet Bagnaia...
Well, they also live together, so...
Yeah, exactly. Sure. So there's going to be some pillow talk.
Yeah, they're chilling in the garden in their their tent.
Yeah, I think so. They're definitely doing that. Somebody I think who would probably rather be chilling in his garden right now than fighting in MotoGP, it would seem, and everyone's saying it's doom and gloom, is Pecco Bagnaia. So we'll move on from the Marquezes now. So is this panic stations for Bagnaia? We're going to have to say no. We've seen him struggle before and then come back stronger, but it's not a great start, and being beaten by 2 GP24s this time is not good. Jules, he cannot be affording to be finishing behind the customer bikes.
No, on paper, of course not. You're the factory rider. You're a double world champion. Almost won it last year. You won a record amount of Grand Prix last season. So you can't start off like this, you'd say. Is it atypical for him to start a season like this? No. Even in his title-winning seasons, he tends to start off a bit cautious or not very impressive with 3rd places, 4th places. Last season, he had that crash with Mark in Portugal, which was the 2nd race of the season then. And you referred to it this weekend because he won the 1st race last season, which was still in Qatar then. And he said, I only won that because I liked that track so much, but I didn't feel great on that bike. And it actually took him until the first European race at Jerez, I think, when they started to dial in the Ducati with that new rear tire. So it's not atypical for him to start not very convincingly, and he's points-wise a bit better off this season, really. But, you know, it's the fact that he's being like, how do you say this? He's just being annihilated almost by his teammate, which is the most impressive rider to be beaten by, and that what paints his picture even more bland, I think.
So I saw there's one shot of him, and I can't remember where I saw it across the weekend, but he was just standing there, and I swear he looked like the loneliest person on the planet. I can't imagine having been in command of this team, having had this whole team fully supporting him, 2 races in. And, you know, I've seen it written, like the team will not wait around for him, or they'll only wait so long. And then they're off skis and they're fully on train Marquez, and that's gonna be that. And it really is terrible for him that he's had to start out with 2 tracks that are not necessarily to his liking, where he knew he would, like, if you asked him, where are you going to struggle? Even last season, he would have said, oh yeah, if we went to Argentina, he'd be like, yeah, that's going to be a push for me. That's probably going to be a Jorge track. And I'm going to optimize my points for the weekend. To his credit, I feel like he really has gotten about the most out of it, points wise, as he can. And as Jules points out, that because he's not fallen off or, you know, ridden into things, he's certainly better off than he was last season. But Marquez seems to be a much more formidable presence for him. And I want to ask this question, because you are the grizzle, you're the eminence grise of this podcast here. Do you think, based on what I've read now about him reverting backwards and backwards and backwards, do you think he maybe got sucked into saying, oh, let's go for the 24.9 bike, and now it's the 24.7 bike, and now I'm hearing it's the 24 bike? Do you think he was looking at what Mark did and thought, oh, let's go with that because that's faster than last season and I think I can replicate it, rather than saying, you know what, I like at the margins, I don't like the way it feels as much as last season's bike. So do you think maybe he got sucked into chasing Mark a little bit on a bike that isn't quite as well suited to what he needs?
Oof, that's a tough question. So I think he did have the option to take the old bike, probably would have done, but again, Ducati are the factory team. I think they would expect their factory riders to very much take some of the options available to them. Now, he pretty much has gone with last year's bike. Just these little revisions. I think there's some tiny little bits that have changed on the Eternals. So slightly different characteristics. There's some suspension bits that have slightly changed, I think, but I don't think it's a lot. And yeah, you say he's reverted. He's dropping back down revision specs, basically. So I don't know. I think he had to. Personally, I'll let the other panel answer after. I think he saw what Mark was doing and what was going to do, and he had to take the fastest available package available to him, even if that meant he was slightly uncomfortable. Jules?
Yeah, I can see how you get tempted into going with what Marquez says when you're debriefing the postseason test and the preseason 25 test, and the whole team is in doubt of whether to go with the 25 bike or what parts of the 25 bike, and maybe in broader terms you're looking into the same direction, Bagnaia and Marquez, but it's a very interesting question that Trumpets throws up here, because if there is a rider who just blatantly came out saying, yeah, I sabotaged my teammate, I'll go for updates or development direction that isn't the best one, but I know how to work with it and I know my teammate doesn't, yeah, I'm going for that. which happened at Honda with, I think it was Danny Pedrosa.
Yeah, it was Pedrosa. That's what I was about to say. Is you're reaching into a point that Mark
you know,
is,
and,
yeah,
and I
said he
mean,
did.
yeah, and is Mark in this winter desperate enough to start pulling those tricks immediately? I mean, I don't know. I am convinced he's very hungry, but it's I wouldn't say no way he did that, but I can see how Pecco might have been maybe also a bit impressed or overwhelmed with how Marquez his aura and all he brings, and a team maybe even being in awe, that you tend to maybe go a bit along with him. But what he said about reverting back to even an older spec, he said it in the post-race press conference, and more or less, just admitting like, yeah, I'm not gonna go for a 24.9 or 24.7. I'm gonna revert back to last year's bike. I'm gonna get rid of the swing arm that is from the 25 development. And he must think, if Alex Marquez can do this, if Morbidelli can do this on a 24 bike.
That's the point, isn't it? You're seeing the customers on that bike
Exactly.
doing this already, and it works. So why not drop it and go back to it?
Yeah, and I mean, if you're getting beaten by these guys, that must be way above his honor, his self worth. He must be like, at least if I go on a 24 bike, I will beat those guys and I'll end up in second place.
Adam, do you think Pecco should just drop it now and go back to GP24?
No, I think that he should stick to the 25 and try to. I think that the development is going to be a little bit different. And I think that now with Mark in the picture, yeah, there's probably some mind games in the garage and maybe he's in his own head a bit. But I think that he should probably proceed going forward and try to get to the same equipment that Mark is on and try to figure out ways to lead the development in a way. Because I think right now it's turning into something about like, family's got a exciting new little brother, even the little brother's older. But I think that it seems like the way Ducati is starting to behave, it seems like they might forget a certain rider's birthday this year because he's getting a little overshadowed, and the focus is now directed at Mark's side of the garage, especially if the points keep going this way.
Yeah, exactly. So Bagnaia is 31 points behind already. You can get a possible 37 now for a maximised weekend. So after 2 rounds, he's almost an entire maximised race weekend behind in the points already. And yeah, Jules mentioned it. He had a scrappy start to the last couple of seasons, even the championship seasons. But the difference is now he's got Marquez on the same bike as him, of the same potential, and this is a much more difficult challenge to face now. So before we face our next challenge of our next topic, I just want to have a little interlude. If you like the show, then why not give us a follow on Twitter at Mr. Apex Moto. That's at Mr. Apex Moto on Twitter, and maybe subscribe on YouTube. So that's just Mr. Apex MotoGP on YouTube. Or perhaps you'd like to tell us how wrong we are or give us some feedback. Then you can even send us an email to mrapexmoto@gmail.com. That's Mr. Apex Moto with a capital N at gmail.com. So we'll go on to our third topic now. We'll start talking about how doom and gloom it is for Bagnaia, but in all honesty, everyone wants to see Bagnaia come back, and I'm pretty sure that when we start hitting tracks like Qatar, that we will see him back at fighting. And we want to see it this season. We want to see him versus Marquez, gloves off, last lap showdown, because that's going to be epic. But something else which was epic was a resurgent but slightly rude Frankie Morbidelli. It's great to see Morbidelli back up there. The VR46 boys have been really quick. I know Fabio Di Giannantoni's still got a bit of a wonky collarbone, but Morbidelli, absolutely fantastic. He risked, along with his teammate, the VR46 boys both ran the soft rear tyre. So that was a very interesting choice, because Morbidelli said he knew it would drop and he had to manage it at the end of the race, and he clung on to get P3, his first podium since 2021, which is crazy, Jules. It's a long time off the main podium, and he just clung on from Bagnaia pushing hard at the end.
Yeah, I think the TV graphic showed it was like 1,400 and a bit more days since his last podium. I think Spanish Grand Prix 21. And you could just see how much it meant to him. And I thought he didn't steal it in any way either. He, knowing, having started on the soft rear tire, he knew like I'm really gonna have to build this up slowly, and he did. And I can remember even last season, I think it was the Grand Prix at Sachsenring, when he was on the Pramac and he had one of his good weekends, and he just stormed off like he was in P2 for a while, and everybody was just like, looking at their watch like, okay, how long till this tire is gonna drop off? And it did, and then he dropped back massively. But I thought it was a really, really well built up race. And afterwards, he said like, in those 1400 days, I had like massive doubts that he doubted if he was even worth a spot in MotoGP, if he was good enough, if he was enough. And I thought that was really a really very open and personal response to such a success. And I thought it was really good. I think Morbidelli is always good with a microphone.
Well, do you remember last year when he had that really bad injury that he came back from? Was it at Portimao when he ended up hitting the wall? And he didn't seem like himself for a couple months. I think he had a really bad concussion. And I feel like that just kind of threw off the season, and he rolls into it kind of just, on starting off on the wrong foot kind of thing. And the travel's brutal. And having to deal with that while you're recovering, I mean, I don't understand how some of those guys do that with those injuries. But I feel like he's had an epic comeback. The pace he was on was good. It was good to see him actually being able to overtake people. Unlike, I feel like previous years, he was able to get a good start, be up front, but then whenever he would get overtaken, he would be able to push back. And so being able to see him go back and forth with a few riders and make forward progress through the pack was good.
Yeah, we've seen him previously being not kind of like pushed over, but kind of bullied almost out of positions, particularly when he was on the Yamaha and he couldn't have much of a punch back at the end of the straight. But I think it's gone almost the other way now. I think it's potentially the new Marc Marquez. The moves he's putting on people are very rude. He put on a really hard move on Digi, his own teammate, early on. It was like a really late lunge. We saw a few of these last year. Morbidelli now, I think everyone's going to panic when they see Morbidelli behind him, because so it's really good Adam brought it up. So he turned into the guy that used to get beaten up and slip backwards to the guy who's just going to let the brakes off and do a crazy lunge. Because that move on Digi was hard. But then I couldn't believe it. Bagnaia, his mate from the VR46 stable, who's fighting for the championship, no love lost there. He let the brakes off and put a really hard move on Bagnaia, like really tough move. So after sort of knocking Binder off as well, I kind of always want to see Frankie, like, he's going to do something. It's entertaining, Jules. Like, he's going to do something to let the brakes off, but does he need to calm it down a little bit?
Maybe, because in that sprint incident with Quartararo,
Binder.
It was Quartararo, right?
Yeah.
No,
Binder.
Binder in the sprint.
Binder,
Quartararo
sorry,
last year that he punted.
Quartararo was last season in that rain race in Thailand.
That's the one.
Harpooned him. But okay, back to this. It almost seems like he's a bit, hopeless in these moves. Just like, okay, calm down, just find the brakes. It's not your first race ever. But then again, I feel he's making the most of this moment. He got a lot of stick last season, and indeed he had a very severe injury, which played parts in his performances. And when he got this ride, a lot of people said like, why, this guy should be out of MotoGP. And I feel he's making the most of this moment. He has a bike that is very competitive compared to the others. This is his chance, and he's making his mark.
Well, yeah, to me, that'll be the interesting thing to see, because it's such an upgrade, the bike that he's on now. It's a question of, as he fully understands the capabilities, do we see these moments lessen? Not that he's not going to put a hard move on you, but he's not going to put an excessively optimistic move on you, if you catch the difference between the two. Like, he's on a bike right now and he thinks, I can do that. But maybe after a couple of races, he says, well, it feels like I can do that, but now I know better. I'm just going to take both of us down.
Hopefully he does, and hopefully there's no more crashing and no more injuries for anybody. But let's get on to some best of the rest and honourable mentions, shall we? So it's awesome to see Frankie back on the podium, and seeing Digi up there as well. And Frankie's very much beating Digi this year already. Digi has been a little bit injured, but so Digi's on the GP25 or the GP24.73, whatever it is he's running. But on to the honourable mentions now. And Honda have actually jumped Yamaha. We've mentioned Zarco being mega pace all weekend. Absolutely brilliant. But there are 3 Hondas in the top 10 in the end, with Mir and Marini getting 9th and 10th, which is absolutely brilliant to see. And no one saw them overtaking Yamaha. Everyone thought it was Yamaha who was making the big moves. They're making the big signings and the engineering signings, and they're talking about V4s and whatnot. But they didn't have a great race at all, really. And mainly, well, we can talk a little bit about Fabio Quartararo now. He was taken out at the start by Bezzecchi, having a horrible crash. And this is one of the bits which is a shame this weekend. We still yet to see the proper potential of Bezzecchi on that Aprilia, because he's always had some sort of drama or a mare happen at the start of these Grand Prix, and then he's sort of faded. But this one, his fair play to him, he's taken full ownership, he's taken it on himself, he outbroke himself, went straight, hit Fabio Quartararo's rear wheel, which kind of put Quartararo to the back, because Quartararo actually had qualified 7th, so it was a big shame for Fabio. Adam?
One thing that I'm noticing about the new race direction with Krafar being in the picture was that I feel like last year that would have been a penalty, and this year I feel like, I don't know if it's more lenient, but I feel like that almost deserved a penalty because it seemed like irresponsible riding, but with Krafar's insight, I feel like that's also still a racing incident. And so it's kind of one of those 50-50 things. But I feel like this year it's more lenient. And I feel like it might provide a better outlook for the rest of the season in a way where it's not going to be unnecessary penalties and where they're along the lines of more let these guys race. And so I don't know how you feel about that, or if it's even worth mentioning, but that's just something I noticed.
No, it is interesting because Krafar is a racer. Krafar is a racer, and that's the whole point of him having him there, and he can give some of these sort of decisions on slightly more nuanced and maybe sort of subjective matters of going in here. So
and he's also been an instructor for a long time too for track day school.
Yeah, exactly.
So
he knows his stuff, and he's written books about riding and all sorts. But last year, wasn't it? I think it was Nakagami, wasn't it, in Barcelona? Like, got sucked in completely with the aero at the start and skittled a load of people. And I think he got a massive penalty, didn't he? A double long lap, or did he get a race ban or something for it? So I like his leniency. Nobody obviously does it on purpose. But yeah, it was a bad mistake, and I like the fact that he held his hand up and was just like, "Yep, it's completely my mistake." But I get your point, Adam. Like, it's not malicious. He's just got sucked in. It's a new bike. And yeah, Trumpets, really unfortunate, because it would have been good to see Quartararo up there, but I'm still desperate to see what this Aprilia can do, what the factory Aprilia can do at least, because we've seen the rookies on it do really well.
Yeah, and it was showing a lot more promise, the factory one, as we suspected, with a little more data and being able to sort of begin to figure out what matters, because, for the non-factory team, there's less noise to dig through. That you have to focus on but with the factory people, there's loads of stuff to dig through. And as you figure out what matters to your rider, that's where you can start to find those, not just the big gains, but the marginal gains that will eventually put you ahead. And it looked promising, looked like a good track for the Aprilia. And it also looked like a decent track for the Yamaha. And it's a shame that happened. But, it's a start. And Miller had a big drama that I think might have played a part in where people wound up being. But I'm also just remembering someone saying like, oh yeah, someone's ride height device got stuck for the first half of a lap. And these are also things that can happen, especially at the start of the race. And so it's important, I think, from a stewarding point of view, to sort of differentiate between they made a bad choice, like, oh, I thought I optimistically let the brakes off and my front wheel was just right back on the racing line where this person was always going to be, and that's totally my fault, and you should get a penalty for that, versus old tires, start of the race, all these weird devices which may or may not work properly, and very clearly with a lockup like that, I mean, that's Bezzecchi's far above that, so you're just assuming something went slightly wrong there. And that's why they wound up in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. There was no intent, and yeah, there's a lot of context around it. Was he being overly optimistic, and it just didn't look like it at all? You see, it's the way he initially got on the brakes. I think he realised it was a bit late, got on the brake a bit too hard, lifted the rear wheel, and as soon as the rear wheel lifted, that was it. He was in loads of trouble, and all he could do was just straighten up. Luckily, not to take Quartararo off, he put him to the back of the grid. But Quartararo actually wasn't that optimistic afterwards anyway. He didn't think he made up a few places. He made up a few places, but he didn't. He probably thought he was going to slip back throughout the whole pack. You know, he ended up finishing 14th in the end. It wasn't really that strong from him. But Yamaha have been one of my biggest disappointments of the season. Really, like they've not been great at all. Really, and they're struggling. So hopefully, when we get back to sort of the European legs and get some more sort of representative tracks, if so. So I imagine nice and hot and slippy.
I'm
sort of
curious
hot
what their
Barcelona.
top speed is going to be at Coda on the back straight or Qatar, just because it seemed like they had a lot done to their motor. And I know that their issue has always been wheel spin. And so hopefully I feel like that was going to be some good insight to their pace.
Yeah, absolutely. What else happened? I want to talk a bit about Digi's last lap mugging of Zarco for was it P5 or P6? And I think in the end, like absolutely beautiful move. It was P5. What a move through the fast stuff for Jules. Like nobody, I don't think nobody really expected him to shove it up the inside in that really fast corner. Everyone's expecting a last lap lunge on the brakes into the final corner, but wow, he held that bike tight.
He definitely did. And it was 2 P5s for Digi in the end this weekend. And also last weekend, or 2 weeks ago in Thailand. He wasn't there from the start, but he gradually put himself inside the top 10 and then grab another 1 or 2 positions. So despite him being still not fully fit, because I believe his what was thought to be well-planned shoulder injury at the end of last season, missing the last 2 races, eventually didn't work out quite as well, and he's still having some problems with that. Of course, he broke his collarbone in that wheelie attempt in the preseason test. So he's far from 100% fit and fully onto that bike, which is a new bike for him, the GP25 or whatever it is. So I think he's showing a real promise and. That he is from a different level to compared to a lot of these guys in the midfield. You know, a lot of these good riders. But I really feel like Digi has this extra bit if things come together for him, and if he stops creating problems for himself.
Well, see, to me, this is exactly where I made my comment about Honda at the beginning with the gerbils. He fell off the back of Bagnaia and no longer had the benefit of the draft down the straight. And that on the Honda just meant that, he could, and we saw at the beginning of the race when he was racing Bagnaia, he would pass him through twisty bits and immediately get repassed anytime a straight was longer than about 500 meters. 300 meters, 200 meters, like you know, to my front door from the living room. This is why it was super
impressive that Digi slipped up the inside of him on an actual corner rather than using the Honda's sort of weakness against it on the straight. So yeah, so you would have thought Zarco exhibited that straight line deficit, getting mugged down to turn 5 or something like that. But the fact that Digi turned underneath the Honda, which looked like its strong point weekend, made the move even more breathtaking.
Yeah, no, it did, but I feel like it was a done deal once he lost the draft of Bagnaia, one way or another. And, you know, again, the thing to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Honda generally like horsepower crazy with their engines? Like this seems kind of...
Always used to be.
The Big Bang, was that them? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. There always used to be the Honda lanes they're going on about, but in this sort of generation, they've got so much power they can't use it or put it down anyway, and they rely on the electronics, and the Honda engine got more and more aggressive and unrideable and unusable. So they had the power, they couldn't use it. So I don't think it's a lack of horsepower as such, it's a lack of usable power.
Usable power, is that where we are with them? Okay. No, I can live with that because it still sounds like a sortable issue. And I this is, you know, I said at the beginning, I would argue the optimism. The optimism here is if the Honda can look that good and be that far down on the straights, Well, we have a whole season for them to figure this out, and they have concessions too. I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with this, because this seems like, oh, it's exactly a problem to solve and not 32 different problems that all interact with each other.
Exactly. It's positive signs from Honda, but not so positive that you still don't get mugged for P5 on the last lap in an awesome move by Digidare. It was awesome. Somebody else who I thought had a really good race was Ogura again. So he had a scruffy qualifying. I think he crashed in Q1, didn't he? He had a scruffy qualifying. He wasn't looking that great, but he had a brilliant fight up. Been able to make moves and fight up all the way into 8th place. Absolutely awesome ride, but he got disqualified at the end of the race in a completely really weird thing with the rules. So his ECU had the wrong version of software, which is unhomologated. I can never say that word, from Magnetic Morelli. I think he does the who does the electronics, and they had loaded a different version on there during testing, Jules, so they could test it, and then because of the crash Agora had, they had to quickly change the ECU, and it still had the wrong version of software on it. Sounds like a draconian penalty for DQing him.
Yeah, Ogura must be one of the most unlucky guys this weekend, because he had a great repeat of his impressive debut weekend in Thailand. And the problem eventually turned out to be that during the winter test, Magneti Marelli, they gave a couple of teams a new bit of software to put on their ECUs, that's like their hard drive. To test and to see how it worked, and maybe homologate that in a later part of the season. Aprilia Trackhouse put that ECU aside, but Ogura trashed his bike in the practice session, and they had to compose a new bike, and they picked some bits from the bike that was used in testing. And it had that hard drive, that ECU in it, and they installed it, and they apparently didn't get any, pop-up notifications like, oh, this you can't use this software. So yeah, harsh penalty. I mean, poor guy. I mean, it was P9, and it handed Honda 3 bikes into the top 10, but still, let's not take away anything from what Ogura showed again this weekend.
Well, first of all, I love the fact that throughout most of the race, he had a huge fight with Acosta. Like, I'm loving this rivalry already between Acosta and Ogura. Think about it. The same number of syllables, starts with a vowel, ends with a vowel. It's perfect in so many ways. But what's crazy is Jules brings this up. There was supposed to be a warning that popped up when they loaded that software on there, that you've loaded this for a version of for the previous version of this firmware on the ECU, and it never showed up. But the thing that I just mostly want to be clear about, and this is because I did have time and read some articles, is that the software that they loaded on it essentially zeroed out any advantages that might have existed on the future version of the firmware that they've not homologated yet and given to everybody. So there was zero performance benefit from it. And what the team said, and I think this is correct, is because this is always the case with technical penalties, is that sometimes it's just a process thing. And it's absolutely correct. They had an illegal version of the firmware on the bike, and it's an automatic disqualification, and that's for very, very good reasons. Launch control. Not talking necessarily MotoGP, but it's for very good reasons to keep people from slipping things in like that and getting unfair advantages.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you kind of got to set the precedent. You can't allow something like that without, punishment, even if it's just seems completely pointless. But it opens the door for future to reference, a previous incident like this if it goes unpunished.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to be strict with the rules, but it's just really unfortunate in a time like this that the innocent sort of party in it, the rider who had obviously probably had no idea any of this was going on, put in a great ride, but has had it taken away from him. But yeah, so that was it. So the championship standings after the Argentine Grand Prix is Marc Marquez has got a maximum 74, now, and following his brother, so it's been a Marc Marquez 1-2 in 4 consecutive races now. So Alex Marquez is 16 points back, with Bagnaia in third in the championship, a further 31 points back. So it's this time of the show where we like to give out some awards. So Matt, I'll do you first very quickly. Who was your rider of the weekend?
You know, I'm very tempted to say Ogura because I love him, but I'm gonna go with Zarco, 110%, because that Honda he just absolutely mastered that thing into a place where I didn't think it belonged, and then managed to keep it there far longer than I ever thought he would. So he got my vote for this weekend.
That's a good one. Jules, who was your rider of the weekend?
I'm going to go with an atypical one. I'm going to go Pedro Acosta. And not because he was great, but because he scrapped P9 on Sunday. And the reason why I was so excited before the start of the season, because I thought we're going to have Acosta on KTM, Jorge Martin on Aprilia, 2 great riders in the factory Ducati. Who knows what Yamaha will be able to do. And then for various reasons, it all started to fall apart. And yeah, I mean, this guy must be kicking himself. He was so impressive at the beginning of last season, and now he's just, a shadow of himself.
Yeah, it was sad to see. We didn't get on to talking about KTM, but another sort of very underwhelming performance by them this weekend. And absolutely, that's a good one for the rider of the weekend. Adam, who was yours?
I was going to say Ogura, but I don't really want to because Alex kind of surprised me a little bit more. And I feel like Alex kind of set the tone for hopefully the rest of his season. And it's really surprising to see, but also really good to see. It's kind of like little Nepo brother is there, but it's actually not really, because he's got pace and he's got the stamina to actually make this pace last a GP and not just a sprint. And so I feel like he's kind of putting his foot down a little bit and showing what he's worth. And it was good to see. Alex Marquez is definitely rider of the weekend for me.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is. Yeah, it's good. It's good to see somebody actually battling, and I'd love them to get closer. It'd be great. I'd love to come to blows. It'd be epic to see a fierce brotherly rivalry. My rider of the weekend was Ogura, just for having that 8th place taken away from him. Gutted that he got disqualified again. Another really strong rookie performance. So on to moment of the weekend, and I'll get mine out of the way quickly before handing over to my panel. Mine was as soon as Marc Marquez actually, and this is going to be a negative moment of the weekend, Marc Marquez passing his brother Alex, the time he made it stick, the front looks like it's starting to lock up, the bike's in all sorts of shapes, you don't know if he's going to tuck the front and lose it underneath him, and the director decides to cut away and show you people in the grandstand. Instead, I was going absolutely ballistic, and it wasn't just a split second, it was a good 3 seconds. I didn't know what was going on, and it had come back and the move had been made, so I was going absolutely ballistic at the TV. So screw you, TV director, that was unforgivable.
I'm
Trumpet,
with
what was
you.
your moment?
Yeah, I was yelling at my TV
Thanks,
as well.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not the only one who was screaming at the TV like, what on earth was going on there? Trumpets, what was your moment of the weekend?
I really think at the end of the day, the thing that I enjoyed most was watching the Acosta-Ogura battle. I mean, I sort of made a joke about their names, but it was so much fun to see the two of them trading blows. I mean, obviously the Aprilia, I think, is overall a more composed bike than the KTM, but that to me, this is the battle of the future, and that was just a tiny little preview, and I'm very excited to see the two of them in the sport together.
Absolutely, that's brilliant. Jules, what was your moment of the weekend?
Tough one. One of the things that stood out for me after the Sunday race was the contrast between celebrations for the Marquez brothers and half of the Ducati garage, and at the same time, Bagnaia already going into the press obligations because he didn't finish on the podium. And thing about that, for me particularly, is that he doesn't strike me as he starts to self-doubt himself, and that he thinks he's not fast enough anymore. He lost it. He's clearly, like he says, looking for that feeling. and it seemed that he's still confident that if he gets that back on whatever version bike, that he's still good enough to take on Marc Marquez. So, yeah, let's hope for more riders fighting at the front.
Absolutely. And let's also hope that you'll go and follow my panel. So, Adam, where can people follow you?
I'm only on Instagram for the most part, at Adam.GrandPrixTravel. If anybody's going to be at Circuit of Americas for MotoGP, I'll be out there on Saturday and Sunday. But yeah, I'm actually heading to China this week for F1, coming back to Austin for MotoGP, and then going back across the Pacific to Japan for Suzuka. So I might be a little delirious at Coda, but I will be there.
That's amazing. Yeah, go and follow Adam on his travels. What an effort. I am very, very jealous. Matt, where can people follow you?
As always, at MattPT55 on pretty much any social you care to name.
And Jules, where can people get you?
You can find me on Blue Sky, and the handle is Jules on Racing.
Awesome. And why not follow me? That's at Kyle Power, at Kyle Power F1 on the Twitters. I really need to move over to this Blue Sky thingy. We'll be back again in 2 weeks to review round 3, the Grand Prix of the Americas at the wonderful Austin circuit. So, as always, thanks for listening to Mr. Apex MotoGP.